Digital classroom management. Maddie just turned on transcriptions for those who would like them. I know in some classes we've served out a Google form for you to take attendance on, especially with smaller groups like this. It's really easy for us, who's ever not driving, to take attendance just right out of the Zoom participants list. So as long as your name is identifiable, which it looks like everyone's is, we'll just go ahead and take attendance and you won't have to do anything. So then at the end of the class, we'll submit that. You'll get your surveys, and then HR will get your clock hours out to you when they're able. So that should be the only housekeeping things here. We kind of already informally introduced ourselves, but I'm Pete Connors. I'm the Instructional Technology Coordinator for the East Region, and I'm joined by...
I'm Maddie Oakley. I'm the Instructional Technology Coordinator for the West Region. That's Bothell High School, Kenyon Park Middle School, and many of the elementaries within that pathway. Looking in the chat, some of the buildings sticking out are Maywood Hills and Frank Love. Those are schools that I work with.
Okay. All right, so just a rundown of the agenda. We'll talk about what and why of this course, the role of devices in the classroom, some ideas for communicating expectations to your students. We'll have a section on reminding ourselves that mistakes happen and how we can try to ameliorate them and address them. Apara highlights we'll do a discussion of and a few demo videos to help with supporting your classroom in its use of digital devices, and then supporting and modeling information literacy right before our closing. All right, so section 1, why this course? I believe, oh yeah, so this one is some of people's issues that they had with devices in the past, and so we've I think we had a Padlet out at one point to get feedback from people about what were your biggest issues with
I'll put that in the chat as well, Pete, if anyone wants to add on any thoughts about things that were a challenge or went well last year. You can add that to the Padlet that's in the chat. But I also had reached out to some teachers during the summer to get some feedback about like what was going on for you, and these were some of the challenges that they listed.
Yeah, there's always a student who left their device at home. Constant problems around students forgetting to charge. Students who also would lose their charger, or many didn't have their names on them. Those chargers are they're at least model specific. So it's like, it seems like it's not a big deal when they lose them, but it actually can be. While most kids would be on task, several would not be on the correct sites. It's easy to get distracted even with playing with the clock, or let alone if you find a way to get Google Snake running. A comment here about iPads at the school. We had kindergartners watching YouTube when their teacher's back was turned, and first graders taking thousands of pictures. So there you go, an example of that. Not really something you can block because it's just built into the device. I don't think there is a consistent message that tech at school is a tool and that school devices are like a work device. They're not toys, even though they are assigned to you and you take them home. All right, so Maddie, anything to add on that one? I'm not sure if there's anything new in the Padlet.
No. I can read off some of the things that are in the Padlet, and I see someone has put in a comment right now from this training, which is great. So in our past trainings, people have said they had challenges with knowing like how to share things with students, being able to block or certain sites. Worries about cheating. Folks were worried about students copying and pasting some text from certain places and then pasting it into digital assessments and feeling like that got normalized. Students wanting to listen to music, but only having YouTube as an option. Not knowing who made comments on Jamboard. Jamboard is a digital tool that doesn't track like necessarily who has made a comment. So maybe teachers being like, well, I can't really use this anymore if I have students who aren't using it appropriately. And just have a comment in here that headphones were kind of an issue with a couple of this person's students yanking the plug out and breaking the portion that attaches to the iPad. So yeah, there's a million things that can go wrong and a million things that can go right. And kids will always come up with a new way to creatively push boundaries that you didn't know existed, right? You're like, okay, now I need to teach a specific lesson about, okay, when we take our headphones out of our iPad, like we have to use our careful gripper fingers, or you know what I mean? Like you don't always think ahead of time of how much do I need to break down every single piece of how to use a device. So sometimes those things you can plan for, sometimes you have to plan for them when they come up. Oh yeah, and we've got translation features on Schoology assessment tool, lots of cheating in Spanish class. Unfortunately, there is a built-in function within Google Chrome itself to allow Google Translate, and it's not something that can be turned off. It's in like the browser. So I know we've had some questions from specifically language teachers the last year about like, how can we make it that students aren't able to use Google Translate to cheat on their assessments? I can't assess them if they're just using Google Translate. Pete, do you remember what some of our solutions were? I feel like some of it was like creating an assessment where instead of typing the question, you like typed the question in like a Google Doc, then took a screenshot of the question and put that in the assessment. So it's a picture of the text instead of actual text that can be translated. So again, kids coming up with things that sometimes you then got to reach out to us or your STS of what can I do to navigate these issues that I didn't even dream of.
No, I know with that one, it's like, then you can't copy and paste it, and like the auto correcting doesn't work, but you know, it does keep the translation from happening. I remember trying to do a bunch of stuff with the web filter that couldn't block it because it's not actually a website, it's built into the browser. All right, so let me click forward here. So why a digital classroom management course? And so here on the left, we just have like a 2-bullet timeline of pre-2020. Oh, good. Glad to hear it, Joe. So pre-2020, a lot of us probably were used to carts of shared devices, and you maybe needed to check them out, and there was a clipboard, and sometimes they weren't plugged in, and someone had taken them, even though they didn't sign them out, or right at the beginning of the year, somebody signed up for them for huge chunks of the year, like precluding anyone from using them. Now, post 2020, we have all these devices. Our students are going to walk them into our classrooms and have an expectation that they're able to use them. And now the question becomes, well, how do we manage these devices? Previously, pre-2020, we didn't really have to worry about managing them because we couldn't always get them, or we could just not have them around. And now we're in this world of, well, we got them, how do we manage them? So just like anything else, we want to start our school year with a solid plan, and we'll discuss a framework for considering how you want to introduce and teach your expectations for using devices in the classroom. And part of that is going to be showing you tools, the big one being Hapara Highlights, where you have more control of those student devices than you might think, but it's leveraging tools that you might attribute for use in other ways. Like Hapara, came into the district as a document management tool. At this point, I think probably more people hold it in high esteem because of its device management abilities. But if you think of it as still a document managed site, you might not realize like how much it can do from the device management side. So we'll spend some time in there. All righty. So then who is taking this course? Our hope in designing it and advertising it is that it's really anybody out in the buildings. It's administrative staff, teachers, guest teachers, all levels of instructional staff, as far as grade levels are concerned, would have the opportunity to be in this course. I mean, these device management considerations, and then, you know, the logistics around their use, I think can be applicable to anybody.
And in this course specifically today, if we have some people entering late who maybe didn't see every comment in the chat, it looks like I would say the majority of folks in this course today are classroom teachers, but we do have some paraprofessionals, a long-term substitute. We've got kindergarten all the way to middle school. So, you know, we've got a wide variety of folks, and I see people who have also taken some of our other courses this week. Our adapting instruction course and this digital classroom management course, or Pete and I were talking about it earlier. It's kind of like if you have your Venn diagram, right? You've got your two circles. This one has a lot of overlap. So if you've taken one of those other courses, hopefully seeing things for a second or third time will help you feel even more comfortable with using them this school year. And for those of you who do teach maybe kindergarten or first grade, some of the things that we talk about with Hapara Highlights works with Chromebooks, not with iPads, which is what kindergarten and first grade have. But one thing that we've mentioned before, and I'll mention right now before we forget, is if you are having like chronic issues with a kindergartner or first grader with misuse of iPads, you can talk with your building admin and STS about the idea of assigning a Chromebook to that student instead of an iPad, so that you can have a little bit more control over their ability to do certain things on their device.
Yeah, so I mean, speaking of device types, next section here is the role of devices in the classroom. And, you know, we really have two different really predominantly two device types, right? We have Chromebooks and we have iPads. The Chromebooks are assigned to students in grades 2 through 12. There's a variety of manufacturers that we have. I think at this point we're predominantly on Lenovo's and HP's.
And this image is a Chromebook that we do not have. I just found a Chromebook image, so
I've done the same thing. Where it's
I was like, of course I found one that's not a brand that we have.
Yeah, but
it's fine. They're similar.
If we went through the device management systems, I'm sure we'd find that there are some Acers out there. Yeah, that's one of several companies that manufacture Chromebooks. And with a Chromebook, it really doesn't matter who makes them, because all a Chromebook really is a very lean laptop that is running an operating system that, you know, actually, isn't that, that's a Windows device, that's a PC.
I apologize. I just was really looking for an image that was a Chromebook that was a PNG type, so it didn't have like a weird background, and this was the best I could find. Pete, of course, is going to focus on the fact that it's not actually a Chromebook. Imagine that it is. Okay, moving forward, go on.
Sorry. We'll talk about making mistakes later. So anyway, it's a very low spec laptop that runs an operating system that's developed by Google that is really just Google Chrome in operating system form. So they have great battery lives. They're really easy to update. Nothing is really saved locally. So if a student forgets their device and needs to take a loaner, they just log into another one. It connects them to their Google ecosystem and the internet widely, and they're able to get to everything they need to go to. Like, so they can get Schoology. They have a bunch of stuff in Google Drive. It's going to be there waiting for them. You log into these devices either with your student email and password or with a Clever badge. They have a camera right up at the top, so a student can just hold their badge up to it, and then that'll log them in. That's how the device knows who they are, and then it trickles through and tells the rest of the system through Clever what they have credentials to log into, so they can get into their TCI or they can get into their Zoom account just by having originally logged into Clever. So then, our other predominant device type here is for K1. It is an iPad. The does not require a login. Oh, and with the Chromebooks, they go home with students. So if a student has a Chromebook, unless there's a different plan worked out as far as them coming and going with those devices, they go home with students at the end of the day. With the iPads, they stay in the school during the school year. Folks usually have carts that they put them back into at the end of the day, and they charge there. The students don't bring them back to their homes. Functionally, with the iPads, there's no login required, so the device doesn't know who the student is, and therefore, like, there's not it's not gonna, there's no way to switch, right? Like if a student uses iPad 4 on Monday and they take a bunch of pictures and they create, some local documents, then on Tuesday, they're gonna wanna use device number 4 again, because that's where those files are. So it's good to have some practices around, make sure, this is your device, even though you leave it here. It's not a shared device. We could say maybe that there's a third device type in the sense of the Mac laptops. Some students, like generally through IEPs, are going to have those assigned to them if they have special software or something like that. But in that case, they work really similar to, well, I don't know, somewhere between a Chromebook and an iPad, in that you are logging into it, you can save stuff locally, but it is a laptop. All right, next section here, we're talking about when do we use the devices. And I think we would probably all agree that we are not going to use them 100% of the time, and that we want to set an expectation that device use is directed by the teacher. And to that end, we've got a section here that shows some examples of some things people have used to help convey to their students when device use time is happening. So we have a resources folder that we'll be sharing out with you that has links to, like, the slideshow over on the right, the poster on the left. Your STS might even still have some of these posters. This was something that we rolled out during Bring Your Own Device when that first was released, like back in 2018 maybe now. But that's just like an easy way for you to have a little magnet slider or clothespin that you move up and down that traffic light, letting students know that, whether or not they should be considering their device in use or available for use. Over on the right is a slideshow that can be something you could show to work through with your students. We call it Teaching About Chromebooks. There's also one for teaching about iPads. It gives some functional explanations to students about, like, where the buttons are on the Chromebooks, in this case, like, how is the keyboard different than something they might be used to. But then it's a lot of prompts about, like, getting a class discussion going about how can we be safe with the devices, how can we be responsible with them, respectful, functionally, how do we sign in, how is the keyboard different, where is the power button, those types of things. We've definitely seen teachers that have worked with upper grade, like say a grade that's already been using Chromebooks. You're a second grade teacher, so your students are it's their first time using the Chromebooks. Having some older students that were really great with their Chromebooks come back and maybe lead some of co-teach some of these kind of discussions about what were your classroom expectations and now what will they be for this new class. So yeah, that's going to be in your resources folder or resources slideshow.
And that same, just to point out that same idea could be used by kindergarten teachers as well, with some first graders or second graders that have used iPads in the past. So I'm sure, like Christine, in your long-term sub position, you could reach out to some of the other kindergarten and first grade teachers, ask if they know of any students that would be good teachers of your class for learning how to use those iPads.
All right, so a lot of teachers try to have a signal or a hand sign, like some way to convey to students that, device time is starting, or probably more importantly is stopping. And so how do we make a good routine where, just like putting down pencils, that it's got to happen quick, and it's got to be a recognizable and routinized movement or process that the students are either, pulling back their hands, how do they stow the device? Is it getting pushed to the center? Is it going into a bin? Is it going into a sleeve and going into the desk? So to that end, we've got some
cheesy ideas that I found, so feel free to use them or adjust them.
So Maddie, maybe you should explain clap it and laugh
Sure. And one of the ideas here is you probably already have a signal that you plan on using, or you've used in the past with students, right? We all know 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, or like a clapping a signal and the students clapping it back. The idea of having a different one for when students are using devices, you've got some novelty, and you're connecting a specific signal to the idea of, I need to stop using my device, not just, stop my movement or turn off my voice, but I also need to stop using the device, because we all know they can quietly keep using a device. So one is clap it and lap it. So you might say clap it, everyone claps, and lap it, and everyone puts their hands in their laps. Okay. The next one would be T-Rex arms. That one's kind of fun, because you could show a little like drawing of T-Rex with a little short arms. So T-Rex arms, and everyone puts their arms up like this instead of on the keyboard or on the iPad. And then I've used in the past different little like sound effects in my classroom for a signal. Then I'm not using my voice. I just have it queued up and have a little bookmark to it, and I'll play it when I need to. So one of the ideas, and I was trying to think of some sounds that like might be more interesting in the older grades as well. Like, I said, secondary teachers maybe don't want to do T-Rex arms, but of course one of our favorite high school ASL teachers said, no, I'm going to use all these. I'm going to use clap it. It's going to be great. But if you this slide and these sounds are in the resource slide deck that we'll share with you. But the first one is just the Apple notification sound. So it's just going ding, ding, ding on repeat. So you could play that. Let's see if we can hear it.
I don't know if that's, we sometimes with like the Zoom echo filtering, it kind of knocks it out.
Okay, yeah, it's probably not showing up, but
it's not coming through.
I can hear it. Let me be quiet.
And then the other one we have here is like the dial-up sound from back in AOL days. This one that didn't come through last class because it's a lot more staticky, but we'll try it.
I only heard like the first little bits, but anyways, it does the like, so you could, if I was teaching, I would probably use the dial-up sound one, because I love to like, talk about life with students and talk about like myself, my family, all those things. So I love telling back in my day stories. So I would love to tell back in my day, we didn't just, get online. We had to use phone lines and dial into the internet. So telling the story and then using the sound as a signal of this is what the dial-up sounded like, I think would be fun. So
Our next slide here is about device upkeep, and we have some notes here. Both the iPads and the Chromebooks they're very low maintenance devices. I mean, a lot of us probably, even our Mac laptops, like compared to 10 years ago, speaking of back in the day, there's just a lot less restarting we need to do. Updates are maybe a little bit more concise, and do bigger chunks less frequently. A lot of things can now do a update and restore. Like we think about Chrome, when you do an update on Chrome, it generally just reopens all your tabs instead of like, oh, I had to update Chrome and I lost everything I was doing. So it's gotten easier, but there's still things that we can do to make sure from a maintenance standpoint that we spend less of our time on issues. And to that end, we recommend that people restart their Chromebooks 1 time per week. Restarting does allow the system on a Chromebook to, if there is an update in queue, it'll run it. And I would say with Chromebooks, that's like 9 times out of 10 the issue. If someone, they go to open Clever and something won't render correctly, or a tool won't connect, it's usually because the Chromebook is out of date. And there's certainly like us on the tech side would wonder, like, how did that happen? Like, the thing is supposed to update itself whenever it needs to, but sometimes they don't. It gets stuck, and that restart will kind of re-prompt any of that stuff to finish. So actually going down to the little Chrome menu, the little power button, or the little menu thing that's in the bottom right, and clicking on that and actually doing a shutdown is worthwhile. It can be part of a weekly process with students. You could tie it to something like, say you have library on Fridays, like, all right, when we get right before we leave for library, we restart our devices, or right when we get back. You could have a class job of someone who like leads us through it in the, for those types of tasks, and make sure that we actually were able to execute on it. And that should keep those Chromebooks nice and up to date. Same thing can be true of iPads. They don't really update as frequently, but still there's like things in their cache that could benefit from a shutdown. But yeah, they usually have bigger updates that come through on more of like a once every 6 months kind of thing. One thing that does happen on both device types though, but you'd notice it less on the iPad, is that tabs accumulate, and so do apps. Like in order to make it easier for you to get back to what you were doing, things like run in the background once you've opened them once. And on an iPad, they actually persist after you shut down the device. So when if you shut down your iPad and you turn it back on, if you had like 8 apps running when you shut it down, they'll still be there. Like, it'll reopen them in the background when you restart the device. So if you use enough apps, you could end up with kind of 20 devices just running in cache in the background. So both Safari tabs and apps, it can be worth teaching students to just actually close those out. And Maddie, do we have is in the resources, do we have a way to convey to people or to show people how to do that? I mean, I think in Safari it's easy. Like, you just click on there's like a little pagey grid, and you click on that and then you just close out your tabs. But I could maybe add something about
we don't, but I can look, and Apple has some really good help articles, so I'll look really quickly and see if I can find something that goes through that.
In the past, it was like you tap on the home button, but now as we get into the world of iPads without home buttons, I think it's probably swipe up from the bottom left. You'll see all your apps, and you just kind of just close them all up, and that'll speed up your device. Yeah, and then just having it so it's helping students to know how to navigate to the tools that we use regularly, and just getting them in the habit, especially in the first few weeks, of going into Clever, going into Drive, have students create a document and, go through, like, maybe put a writing prompt up on the board so they get a chance to build something in Drive and kind of learn where those are. And especially like, say, on an iPad, like, you're going to have students in those youngest grades that have experience with iPads, but probably not with Google Drive, right? So, where is that app on my device? How do I get in there? How do I create something? And then certainly with Schoology, with the older grades, folks aren't going to have experience with that tool. So, having those low stakes opportunities for them to get in there and meet some of those tools is going to be useful to help them get there when there's actually, something like an assignment waiting for them. All right, let me find my cursor. There we go. So now we're in a section called Mistakes Happen. This is a picture of Maddie's lanyard. Maddie, do you want to tell a story here?
Sure. I just think it's really important that as people, as adults, we model for students that we make mistakes and it's okay and we can move forward and make better choices. So I like to have this on my work lanyard. I'm many times at the admin center, but I'm often out at buildings. And so I want to make sure that students can see that I too, as an adult, make mistakes, and your students will as well. And yeah, just modeling that mistakes happen and it's okay. But we want to do better next time.
Ideally, steps to take would be agreed upon at a school level. This is so kind of like planning, like what do we do when these mistakes happen? And I mean, this is so similar to addressing student behavior, say without devices, right? Is like we don't want to. Our response is better when we know, like, okay, if this kind of issue happens, where are my thresholds? Like, is this something I handle internally? Is this something that gets some kind of consequence? Is this something that involves parent contact? Is this something that involves building admin intervention? You know, and kind of already having an idea of like, which direction do you go? Obviously, you know, we all know that in the classroom, we get surprised all the time, but still being able to sort into like, what is my next step here, can make our responses more consistent, makes that more predictable for the students, and hopefully gets ahead of some of the mistake making in the future. So, you know, maybe we have a grade level team, SDLT department, where we know ahead of time for our team and for ourselves what we're going to do. And so then over here on the right, we're going to have some examples of like, you know, what do we do as a school or as a classroom when students show up without devices? And so every school has an allotment of loaner devices that's in a cart. Usually at this point, I feel like generally they're managed by the STS, but at some schools, they're a lot of times in the high schools, they're in the library and they get checked out maybe by the library assistant or the teacher librarian, or maybe the STS is in, you know, their offices adjacent to the library, that kind of thing, just to get coverage a little bit easier. But I think in a lot of elementary schools, that cart is with the STS themselves. So anyway, you know, if a student shows up without their device, you know, rather than like if it's already routinized for students to, hey, I forgot my device, can I go get one from the STS? Cool. They had like very quickly are able to address that. Students know how to address it for themselves. If it becomes a persistent problem for them to remember their device, you know, then how do we, you know, incentivize them to remember it? How do we work with families to make sure that device is getting in? But just the actual, like, they need a device right now, or say they brought a personal device and it doesn't work. Okay, they go get a loaner. It's not like you lose 10 minutes of your day trying to help them troubleshoot a personal device, which you shouldn't do. Just have them go get one of the loaners. You know, so that's with that loaner card, that's what we're trying to address, is like, we don't want there to be instructional time lost because we're trying to, oh, this kid brought in a uncharged device. Same thing, like, yes, you could pull your desk back and get to that power strip so they can sit there and charge and still work. Like, no, just send them, like, have them grab a loaner. The loaners are all charged, they're in the cart, and they'll be up and running with a new device. And again, with Chromebooks, it's just so easy to have that taken care of. So having an idea of what you do when students aren't following your device use, like the stoplight expectations, like, you know, is that like, if it's on red and the student is using their device, you know, what level of an issue is that for you, and how does it factor into your behavior management system? You know, just if you come up ahead of time, like what is the analogous analog issue or thing there? If the student was up and out of their seat and not on task, like maybe that's pretty similar. Well, okay, what would be your response to something like that? Probably going to be the same as if they were off task with their device as they were off task with their textbook. That's kind of the same idea there. And then right in these last few, we kind of have an escalation of like, you're bothering others, you're threatening others, are you putting your device and other devices at risk? And again, like, where are your thresholds for, you know, you're bothering others? Okay, that's probably something you handle in your classroom. Are you threatening others? Like, all right, well, you know, at some point you've left, I'm going to solve this in the classroom, and I'm going to, you know, bring in the help of my building administrator. And then certainly, obviously, families too, depending on the severity. And then are you putting your device and others at risk? Like all families have agreed, if they have a device, they have signed a responsible use policy that recognizes that device use and network use is a privilege, and that there are, you know, they are committed to using the device responsibly and safely. And so, no, there's good grounds for saying, like, you know, your families have agreed to this kind of thing, and, you know, we need to live up to that. And so, again, depending on the severity of how they're putting the device or other devices at risk, you know, you would factor into your behavior management system, just like any other issue that we might have in the classroom. All right. Okay, so here we go. This is also in the resources, Maddie, probably.
Yeah, so again, we'll share a little bit later a slide deck that has that stoplight poster, the how to use Chromebooks slide deck, and this is a Google Doc that I intended to hopefully create a flow chart, but creating flow charts is a lot more cumbersome than one might imagine. So instead I made a table with like, what's the behavior? Is it happening or not? And what would be the action that I would take as a teacher? And some of this might be, I share with students, you know, like, hey, just remember, if you don't have your device, I'm going to send you to the STS to get a loaner device. If you keep forgetting it, then we're going to have to come up with a plan, but let's work really hard on remembering it every day. And if you do have it, for the first month of school, we're going to keep track of who brings their device every day, and you get a star sticker. And if you get 15 star stickers, you get a cool thingamajig, right? Like there's different ways to support this besides just what will the consequence be. We can have positive consequences for getting those yeses met as well. So I just know in my time in the classroom when my school worked around kind of having a plan for different typical problem behaviors that had nothing to do with devices. When I wasn't having to come up with in the moment, what am I going to do when X happens? When I had a flow chart, a list of Pete, it keeps recognizing my hand gestures as I have my hand up. So that's why it keeps saying, there's a new feature in Zoom where you can like raise your hand and it will recognize that your hand is raised. So I'm not actually doing that. Anyways, having a plan of, okay, these behaviors may happen. What am I going to do when it happens is helpful. So this resource forces you to make a copy of the chart, and then you're able to edit it according to what you want your plan to be, or if there are other behaviors that you want to have a plan for as well.
Okie dokie. Thank you. All right. Okay. Our next section here is going to talk about device management via Hapara Highlights. So this is a class or a device management tool through which you are able to impact your students' devices Hapara knows who your students are because of a roster sync that's coming out of Synergy and going into Hapara. And you have control of their devices because there's an extension that runs in Chrome, in the Chrome web browser, that allows for these control actions. It works on Chrome OS, and it works if you're logged into the Chrome browser on a PC or a Mac. iOS, that Chrome, like the version of Chrome, like, Chrome does exist on iOS. You know, there is a Chrome app. It doesn't have extensions, and iOS doesn't allow for like remote control. So it's not something that happens on iPads. Hapara highlights would be something you'd be using on Chromebooks, Macs, and PCs.
And Pete, if you haven't already, you might want to stop sharing and reshare with sound, since there's videos that you'll need to play in the next little bit.
Like with original sound?
Yeah, you know how that when you do screen share, there's the option in the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
Like optimize for video clips.
Yeah, cool, thanks. Okay. Where's Oh, am I not at the video part yet? Yeah, videos are coming up. Cool. All righty. Back and share. Okay. So this is for how you will get to Hapara. Your students never have to go to Hapara. We get that question every so often. Like, it's a teach. So Hapara's like product is called Hapara Teacher Dashboard, and it's specifically that. It's tools for teachers to make their device and document management easier, file management easier. It's not something that your students ever have to go to. It's not like Schoology where they're going to a page and seeing the things that you posted. So the way for you to get there is if you go to Clever, so my.nsd.org, or you probably have it bookmarked at this point. One of the tiles in your, and Maddie, do we want to do a little tutorial on missing tiles?
I can go ahead and do that if you want me to share. I already have a teacher.
You have it up? Okay, sure, yeah.
Okay, if you haven't been in Clever or for the past little bit and you log in, it will look a little different than you're used to. I'm going to share screen using a teacher who was in one of our courses yesterday and said it was fine to share his view. So when you log in, it's now going to say, they're trying to point you in the direction of where to go, but it's not very intuitive. So this purple banner says your district resources now live in the district page tab. So right here is where you'll get to all the tiles that you are used to seeing. So you can see when I go to my Clever page and click on district page, I have that Hapara tile that Pete's talking about. But if you're used to logging into Clever and seeing all of those tiles, they're not there at the ready like they used to be. You've got to click on district page.
Perfect. Thanks, Maddie. Oops. Almost clicked on pause recording, but did not. All right. Once you are in Hapara, so you go into Clever, you find your tiles, you click on Hapara. When you log into Hapara, if you only have one class, so I think this is a lot of elementary folks, this will be true for you, elementary classroom teachers, if you're, you will just land right in your class's dashboard. So you'll actually kind of jump to the last step. If you're someone with more than one class, and this can be true in elementary if, like, say you're a specialist and you have full building admin access, you wouldn't actually see any classes. You would click on, I think it's all classes, and you'd see your whole buildings. So classes look like this, though. They're like file folder kind of looking things. And then you click on the one you want to manipulate. If you're in secondary, you'll see all of your courses arrayed in a little grid. And then once you go into your class, across the top, you've got like tabs. And the furthest left ones have to do with document management. But if you keep going across the top, you'll see highlights. It's maybe like the fourth one or something like that. And when you click into highlights, you will then have the ability to control that student device. So here's what you need from students. They need to be logged into a district Chromebook. If they are on a MacBook, and this can be a personal one, and this is true of PCs as well, they would need to be logged into the Chrome browser with their district credentials. They're at apps.nsd.org credentials. And
for this audience today, we have far fewer students in elementary and middle school that might use a personal device. You might have some students with MacBooks, though. So
cool. Yeah. All right. So here's a video here in Loom. That's what do you mean by logged into the Chrome profile? Yeah, this is a really useful one, I think, for people to, because even now I think we don't always all log into our Chrome browser. Just going to jump me out to Loom. And this is just a quick video that Maddie made regarding how to log into the Chrome browser. Oh. And somehow we're muted. Oh no, it's
Hello
just radio.
students, staff, and families. My name is Maddie Oakley. I am one of the Hello students, staff, and families. My name is Maddie Oakley. I am one of the instructional technology coordinators for the North Shore School District. And today I'm going to be showing you how to sign in to your Chrome profile in the Chrome web browser. These steps are especially important for staff and students who are assigned a MacBook or are using a personal device. So for any work that needs to be done for school, it's best for you to be using the Chrome browser. And you can see up here in the right corner, I have this little gray icon. That means that I have not signed into this Chrome browser. So if your screen looks like mine, you'll need to click on this browser. Then you're going to click Turn on Sync. When you click Turn on Sync, it will prompt you to enter your email. You need to enter your district email, which is at apps.nsd.org. Click Next. Enter your password. Then click Next. And you can see that my name has shown up here in the top, and I'm signed in as well to my Google accounts, ready to get into Google Drive. When you get this pop up, do you want to turn on sync? You should click Yes, I'm in. This will bring up any bookmarks that you saved with this profile on Chrome browsers at other times or on a Chromebook, a district Chromebook. So I'm going to click Yes, I'm in. Okay, and now I'm signed into my browser, and you can see all of my bookmarks popped up, and those things are ready for me to use. Now, one thing you might notice is maybe you look at Chrome and you don't have an empty profile. You can see your profile photo. If you click on here and the email address listed is your email address at gmail.com, that is your own personal email that you have signed in with. And we really need folks to be using their district email here in the browser. So if you are signed in with your personal email address and not your district one, you're going to need to add your district email. So you would do what I just did, which is clicking on that profile image, click Add, click Sign In, and then enter your district email and password, going through the same steps that I did before. Then when you click on your profile photo, you'll see multiple options for any accounts that you've signed in with. But the majority of the time, when doing schoolwork or work for the classroom, please make sure that you're using your district profile. Thank you.
always fun to watch myself talk on video there. I'm going to take over the share for a second and we'll do the same presentation, but over from my screen. Okay, so that is getting into the Chrome profile. If students are not logged into that Chrome profile, you're not able to see what they're doing in Hapara Highlights. So that's why we like to make sure to have that really laid out clearly of what it means to log into the Chrome profile. So once you get into Hapara highlights, there are a few different things that you can see when you are in there. And we'll have another video in a second that shows that, but you'll be able to see browser tabs, the activity viewer, current screens, snaps, and schedule. I'm not going to read everything here because in the video that comes next, you'll be able to take a look at that.
All right, teachers, in this video, I'm going to be taking you through the steps to get to Hapara highlights, starting in Clever, making sure that you're signed in.
Can I get real quick? Can you give me a thumbs up in the Zoom reaction if you can hear the video fine? Because I did not choose to do it by sharing the sound appropriately. So just let me know as we're playing if there's any issue with the video.
In. We're using Laurel's account right now to show you exactly from a teacher view. So you can go ahead and start at Clever and then click on the Hapara tile. The other option is to go directly to teacherdashboard.com. And if you don't get logged in right away, there is a login with Google button that you can click. Right away, you'll get in and come to your classes. You can see that works the same way, whether I click the tile or I type in teacherdashboard.com. Then I am going to pick my class that I'd like to take a look at. I'll be brought first to file sharing options. And that's not what we're focusing on today. We're focusing here on the highlights section. So you can see along the gray bar, highlights is the one in the middle. So I'm going to click on highlights. And now I'm going to have some other options show up underneath highlights. Activity viewer, browser tabs, current screens, snaps, and schedule. There's also some options over here on the right-hand side. Browser tabs is where you will always start. That will show you the different browser tabs that are open on the student's device on either their Chromebook or if they're signed into their Chrome browser on a MacBook or personal device. So you'll be able to see just a quick list of any sites that they have open. You also have the option of looking at current screens, which shows you a little mini view of what they have open. The other sections, activity viewer, snaps, and schedule, I'll go over right now. Activity viewer gives you a current view on what your students are doing in class. So if you have students in class with you, they should all be on one website. You should see a lot of students all at one website at the same time. Then you can notice here there's this snaps button. There's snap buttons over here as well, these little icons. I can also go to current screens. And from here, I have the option of viewing a screenshot and taking a snap of that. So now that I did that view screenshot button, if I click on snaps, should take me there. It's not right now. We'll try that again in a second. So let's go over here to activity browser. So I'm going to do this right here. Take a snap of this activity to review and compare. And if I go over here to snaps, I have it right here. I can look at that info later. The option to use the snaps function comes over here in the activity viewer only. So from here, I can look and see what many students are doing, or I can take a snap of unique activity that one student is doing. And then I can review it later in the snap section. You do have the option from browser tabs and from current screens. To view a screenshot, send a message to that student, share a link with them, start a focus session, start a filter session, pause their screen, email them, edit any group that they're in, or write some notes about the student. Okay. This schedule section shows you if you have any focus sessions set up and scheduled, they will show up here. And I'll show in another video how to do those focus sessions.
All right, trying to take that out of full screen. There we go. Okay, so some other things you can do, you can pause all student browsing temporarily in Hapara Highlights. You can view the tiles differently in Hapara Highlights, send messages to students, share links, create a filter session and a focus session. And the next video will show those.
Let's take a look at some other things you can do with Hapara Highlights. So I'm in here looking at browser tabs or current screens. In those two options, current screens and browser tabs, I have these options here on the side. I can pause everyone's screens at once. If I toggle this on, no one can open a new tab, go to a new place. It just stops wherever they're at. I can also sort. Right now I have it sorted by online first. I can also do offline first, or by first name A to Z, or last name A to Z. I would probably recommend online first, so you're seeing the students who are online first, and then the offline ones are farther down below. You can also refresh the page and adjust how many things you're seeing at once. So for right now, you could see I was seeing 15 items at once. You can change that to be 5 or 3, make that even smaller so you can see more tiles at once. So that's the pause screens, sort, and items. You can also send a message to students in the class. It could be anything from like, keep up the good work, to something like, hey, stay on task, please. And you can choose to send it to the class, one student, or a few at a time. You would just check which ones you're sending it to. Obviously, you'll want to send it to online students who it will show up for them. You can also search for students or a group of students. I'll show you groups in a little bit here. So I'm not going to send that message because I don't want to disrupt all of these students. So I'm going to click cancel. My other options here are sharing links. Okay, this is a way that you can share 10 links quickly with students. Let's say everyone's working on a research paper and having a hard time finding information that they need. And you as a teacher find something that's going to help a group who's doing research on an event in the Revolutionary War. You could enter the link from what you found, pick which students you want to send it to, and send it to them right away, sharing those links, and it will open those tabs up immediately for them. You can also do this by scheduling for later to send links. So that's something that you can do as well. And if I schedule something for later, that's also going to show up here in the schedule section. I can also guide browsing. There's 2 ways to guide student browsing. I can set up a focus session. This is really good for if you're doing an assessment in class and you don't want students going anywhere except for Schoology and Google Drive or just a few things. You would go ahead and set up a focus session, and you would say they can only open and focus on the following links. If it's an assessment in Schoology, you may want to say the whole site so they can click around in Schoology, or you can do specific pages as well. You can adjust how long the session should be, what happens at the end of the session, who it's for, and if you're scheduling it for later. Another great option here is to save that focus session as a template, because then later you can go ahead and choose from templates that you have saved to set up those focus sessions quickly. Filter sessions. Well, we do have filtering on our district network and on district devices using Relay. You may find that, for instance, you're not sharing any YouTube links with your class to watch something, and you don't want them going onto YouTube while you are doing your current school activity. You could set up a filter session where you block YouTube for the amount of time in your class, for the whole class, or just certain students, schedule it for later or not.
All right. And let's see, just some other ideas for using Hapara highlights. Yes, it's a great tool for being able to quickly stop students from using devices inappropriately or making sure they're staying on task. You can also use it for things like, I know at the end of each of my periods today, I want to send an exit ticket to my class. So I'm going to schedule sending a link via Hapara highlights, and I'm going to do it 10 minutes before class gets out. And you can just have that ready to go instead of having to remember to do it later. Hapara highlights is also a really great way to share in the moment ideas. So if you have a class working on something and you find a resource that they haven't found yet that you want them to be able to use, instead of saying, okay, like Google these key search words and then click on the third link, that's where I found it. You can just copy that site, go to share links and share it quickly, and it opens automatically on student devices. And you could also use the screenshot function and the snaps function to capture good behavior. You can say, look, like our whole class had the site open that we were working on. That gets us a point towards our class points that we're trying to earn. I also wanted to show really quickly, just like most technologies, Hapara Highlights has had some slight updates since that video was recorded. So I just wanted to show really quickly with a class what things are kind of looking like more recently. So it looks really similar, as you can see. We still have activity viewer, browser tabs, current screen, snaps, and schedule, but we've added freeze tabs, which freezes students on their current tabs and makes it so they can't add new ones. They can't open new tabs. The other thing is that instead of saying how many browser tabs you can see at once, there's just a size option, default or compact, to make those student tiles smaller. I apologize if you hear my dog in the background playing with her toy. Then the other differences are when you click message, it automatically will choose, do you want to do the class, students, or a group? There's still share links, but guide browsing looks a little different. So when I click guide browsing, I get this set up on the side. I still can choose between focus and filter and different templates, but it looks a little different than that image that was there before. The other things that I want to mention are that if you're a secondary teacher, Hapara knows from rostering who's in which of your periods, but Hapara does not know the bell schedule of your school. So if you are setting up a focus session for your second period class and you accidentally put the wrong time in to that for that focus session, it will affect the students in your second period class at whatever time you set up that focus session. So if you make a mistake, those students who are in, when it's actually third period and in different classes, are going to be limited to whatever you've set up in the focus session. So keep that in mind to make sure that you're working with the correct students at the correct time. And then the last thing that I'll mention, and this is helpful also, I know we have like a para educator in our audience today as well, and guest teachers. I know Christine, you've got a long-term sub job, but then probably doing some guest teaching in other places around the district as well. If you have a guest teacher job set up and you're in contact with the teacher ahead of time, you can ask them as the teacher, they can go to their class info and they can add you as a teacher to their class. So that way, when you go to my classes, you'll see that class in your tile of classes and you'll be able to work with that class in Hapara Highlights. So as a teacher, if you need to add a para educator or a guest teacher to your class, you would go to class info, click add new, and then you put in that teacher's email address, but make sure you're using apps.nsc.org because it's connected to their Google account. So using that apps part signifies that it's the Google account. Okay, Pete, anything else that I should mention while I'm in Hapara live here?
Yeah, I think that I usually say this at the end of the Get a Creative one, is just not necessarily while you're live in it, but just like lifting the veil, letting students know that yes, I do have this ability, and using it in that, like that third section Maddie had, the keeping it positive, is kind of a nice way to signal to students, like, you have this ability, in the same way that you have the ability to walk around the room and look over people's shoulders, like you can use that to catch people, or you can use that to say, hey, I like that, the student is doing a great job and is on task, and that's often going to draw more students toward that behavior than just doing the gotchas, and we all know that from like in-person behavior management. So, but it's a way that you can do that, in a PAR, you can do that too without even walking around the room.
Yep. Okay. All right. Pete, you ready to take back over, or do you want me to finish?
Yeah. No, I can do this. That's
okay. Cool.
Do
you want to retake the share, or do you want to just go from my slide deck?
Oh yeah, why don't we start from yours if you don't mind? Sure.
Yep.
Okay, so just a final couple slides here about supporting and modeling information literacy and digital citizenship. So what do we want students to know about digital behavior? We've got a little chart here on best practices, suggestions, like, what students should be, what do we want to convey to them? There is a digital citizenship module of lessons that teacher librarians teach, but I think, it's part of a school-wide culture that you want, that is, again, something like the consistency across classrooms is really powerful. So if students are learning from the teacher librarians, but then also being reinforced in their classrooms, this idea of never telling anyone your name, age, or location, and like knowing that your digital privacy matters, and that you build a digital footprint when you put content or connect accounts or sign up for services. Those are things that are worth being aware of. Students don't need to be like necessarily afraid of creating new accounts on services in their personal lives, but to be aware that that footprint grows every time they set something up or pick up cookies or what have you. We want students to be feel safe in our digital environments and in the internet in general. So to the idea of cyberbullying, we want students to know that if anyone does or says something online that makes them feel sad or uncomfortable, they should feel empowered to tell a trusted adult. Cyber, again, like going back to that RUP, like we have access that allows us to discover when cyberbullying is happening, but 9 times out of 10, that's going to start with a student reporting it. There is some active monitoring that happens, but for the most part, like, it's going to be when students feel empowered to say when something going on online is worth looking into, that we are able to best support them. We want students to balance their time on and off devices, and the same is obviously true for ourselves, and building that culture throughout the building is important, and again, something that is more impactful the wider it is across the school. We want school expectations around devices, so staying on the assigned app or within the choices. It's really powerful if there's consistency across classrooms. I'm sure you are probably already aware of times where if you have a teacher in a lower grade, you receive students from them, and maybe their device expectations aren't the same as yours. Like, yeah, it can take a little bit to get students onto your classroom's way of doing things. And so it's powerful when a building leadership team or school leadership team decides, hey, this is going to be our general expectations and flow of how we address issues with devices, because then it's just so much easier for students and for staff to meet those plans, just like we would with say a disaster or something like that. If we have a set agreement, we can all follow those together. And then back to that RUP, I know Maddie defined that for us here, that we want to remind students they're using school assigned devices and that they are assigned to them, but owned by the school district, and misbehavior can lead to very restricted usage. So it is possible for students to lose access to devices if they are misusing them, both physically and digitally, so to speak. Families have signed a responsible use policy that says this is a privilege. It is possible to lose access to that privilege. So I think sometimes, we have students that think, well, because I can get to the camera and take 1,000 pictures and be off task, well, and I mean, honestly, we have parents that think this too, where, well, if we just lock the thing down enough, then the student won't be able to misbehave on it. And I don't know, from years of trying to manage these things, it's not possible to lock them down. And we all know this, a pencil can be distracting. It's really the behavior expectations and the behavior management that helps students not get distracted by their pencil or their camera on their device. So,
and I just wanted to add to, we want to really make sure that we include in our trainings this week a reminder of there is a responsible use policy. It is signed by families, because I think sometimes last year teachers weren't really maybe aware of that policy and what was in it. And just in general broad strokes, it is I give my permission for my student to use the device. I understand it needs to be used appropriately, and not using it appropriately may lead to restricted usage. So if you have students, if you're in middle school, I've heard stories of middle schoolers being like, this is my device and you're violating my privacy if you take it away or look at what I'm doing with her highlights or whatever. And that is not the case. This is a school assigned tool that is there for their learning. So I just want to make sure that people are aware. Also, going back to that feedback slide, that blue slide at the beginning, where one of our teacher librarians was like, I just don't know if kids are really getting that consistent message of this is a tool and a privilege. So we just want to make sure that teachers feel empowered that they can give that message to students, and it is appropriate to make sure that they know that it is a tool for their learning and a privilege.
All right, so then we just have a closing slide here. This is a training that we are happy to present to staff on campus. Every region has an instructional technology coordinator. Like we said, Maddie and I are East and West. We also have Gavin Molitor in the South and Josh Emond in the North. So this is one that I think there's so much power in behind the scenes about how you're able to manage these devices. And then there's a lot of content and opportunity for discussion regarding school-wide expectations for device usage. And as I feel like a broken record here to a certain extent, but just it's so much more impactful when the expectations are widespread. And even when the adoption of some of these tools are widespread, there's definitely, I think, classrooms that can run a little bit more smoothly because a teacher is aware of HAPARA. You might have a teacher right next door who's struggling with device management and isn't aware of HAPARA. And so just spreading the word about hey, you can manage these devices without HAPARA if your behavior expectations are able to facilitate that, but it makes it a lot easier and a lot more efficient sometimes if you have that digital tool available to you. We have a link to yeah.
Sorry, Pete. I also just want to say, when we say we can present this to your staff, that also means you've come to this training, maybe you found it really valuable, you learned things that you didn't know before, and you have colleagues on your grade level team that don't know this information. You can feel free. We'll work with smaller groups as well. So whole staff, smaller groups, interested groups of teachers, all of that. Do you want me to show the resources slide?
Oh, sure. Yeah, thanks, Patty.
So we do have this digital classroom management resources slide deck. Let me grab that link.
Yeah, I got it.
Share that in the chat. Did you say you already have it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, so Pete will throw that in there. I've got a bit.ly there, and you can pop on in. This gives you a list of what's on here. I've just added the device upkeep slide as well. That wasn't in there before, but it has a link to an Apple resource article about closing Safari tabs on an iPad. So you got a little extra info, but it has a PDF version of the device stoplight poster. So you can feel free to print this at your building or download it and send it to graphics, and they can send nice posters off to you. I made it using Canva, which is a online based tool for creating things like posters. So if you want to edit it slightly, some of the language specific to your classroom, you can click on that link and it will hop you over to Canva, prompt you to create an account, but then you can edit from there. Also the digital behavior actions chart, this will force you to make a copy. I also added to this Google Doc another table on the bottom where you could differentiate between major and minor behaviors. Like, what are the ones that I'm going to just handle myself? What are the ones that I'm going to ask admin to come in and support? Then we also have a link to this Hapara Highlights refresher. So this brings you to a Loom, a video that goes through the entire presentation. And then that also has a link, a yellow link that takes you to the slide deck with all of those other videos as well. So it's kind of like a all-in-one contained, but sending you out to some extra resources, little mini version of the Hapara Highlights training. There's a link to the teaching about Chromebook slide deck, the iPads one, and then the device signal ideas are there with the notification sounds as well. So that's a resource. It's always nice to have something that's ready to use if you'd like to use it. And that is our